My name is Sarah Martinez, and 3 months ago I was sitting in my empty Phoenix apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid bills and wondering how everything had gone so wrong. My parents had just cut me off completely, blocking my number, freezing my access to the family business, and telling everyone that I was ungrateful and standing in the way of progress. The restaurant chain we'd built together for over a decade was slipping away, and the two people I'd trusted most in the world had chosen a smooth-talking consultant named Marcus Chen over their own daughter. What they didn't know was that I'd been sitting on a secret that would change everything. A secret so powerful that in just 3 months, they'd come crawling back, begging me to save the very business they'd tried to push me out of. The look on Marcus's face when he realized what I actually owned was worth every sleepless night I'd endured. If you've ever been written off by the people who should have your back, or if you've ever discovered that you're stronger than anyone gave you credit for, this story is for you. Stay tuned, because what happened next will blow your mind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Phoenix, the smell of fresh tortillas and sizzling fajitas was the soundtrack to my childhood. My parents, David and Linda Martinez, had built Martinez family restaurants from absolutely nothing, starting with a single food truck that they'd bought with their life savings and a dream that seemed impossible to most people who knew them. I was 5 years old when they opened the first brick-and-mortar location, a tiny place in downtown Phoenix that they named Abuela's Kitchen after my grandmother's recipes that formed the heart of our menu. My earliest memories aren't of playgrounds or cartoons, but of standing on milk crates in that original restaurant kitchen, watching my father flip eggs with the precision of a surgeon, and my mother roll out fresh tortillas that would make customers drive across town just to taste them again. They worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, pouring every ounce of themselves into making sure that little restaurant succeeded. There were nights when I'd fall asleep at a corner table, using my backpack as a pillow, while they finished cleaning up for the night. But here's what made our family different from just another immigrant success story. My parents didn't just build a business, they built a community. Every employee was treated like family. Maria, our head cook, had been with us since day one, and when her son needed surgery, my parents paid for it without hesitation. When Tony, our dishwasher, wanted to go to culinary school, they rearranged schedules and covered his shifts so he could attend classes. This wasn't just about making money, it was about creating something that mattered. By the time I was 10, we had 3 locations. By 15, we had 7. Each new restaurant was a celebration, a family milestone that we'd all worked toward together. I wasn't just the owner's daughter, I was part of the team. I started washing dishes when I was 14, not because my parents forced me to, but because I wanted to understand every aspect of our business. I worked the register, learned to cook, served tables, and even helped with bookkeeping during busy periods. The connection between my parents and me was built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Every Sunday, we'd have family dinner at the original Abuela's Kitchen, just the 3 of us, talking about everything from new menu ideas to expansion plans. These weren't just casual conversations. They were strategic planning sessions, where my input was valued and my ideas were seriously considered. My father would spread out financial reports on the table between the plates of mole and rice, explaining profit margins and food costs like other parents might discuss homework. My mother was the creative force behind our menu development, constantly experimenting with new dishes that honored our heritage, while appealing to our diverse Arizona clientele. She taught me that successful business was about authenticity, about never compromising on quality even when it would be easier and more profitable to cut corners. When I suggested adding a weekend breakfast menu to capture the brunch crowd, she didn't dismiss it as a kid's idea. Instead, we spent 3 months developing recipes and testing them with regular customers until we had something special. The business lessons I learned around our family table were unlike anything they teach in business school. My father showed me that treating employees well wasn't just morally right, it was good business. Our turnover rate was practically 0 because people didn't want to leave. Our food quality was consistently high because our kitchen staff took pride in their work. Our customer service was exceptional because our servers genuinely cared about the people they were serving. When it came time for college, there was never any question about what I'd study. Business was in my blood, but I wanted to bring something new to our family enterprise. I chose marketing, fascinated by the possibilities of digital advertising and social media platforms that were just starting to transform how restaurants connected with customers. My parents supported this choice completely, even though they didn't fully understand why anyone would want to spend time on something called Instagram when they could be in the restaurant talking to customers face to face. During college, I'd come home every weekend to work at whichever location needed help, but I also started experimenting with online promotion. I created our first Facebook page, started posting photos of our food, and began building an email list of regular customers. My parents watched with amazement as our weekend crowds grew larger, and younger customers started showing up specifically because they'd seen our posts online. The summer after my junior year, I proposed something that seemed revolutionary at the time: a customer loyalty program integrated with social media check-ins and personalized marketing. My parents listened to my presentation with the same seriousness they'd show a potential investor. They asked tough questions about cost, implementation, and measurable results. When I finished, my father looked at my mother and they both nodded. "Let's try it," my mother said. "But you're responsible for making it work." The program was a massive success. Within 6 months, we'd increased repeat customer visits by 30% and attracted hundreds of new families to our restaurants. More importantly, I'd proven that I could contribute something valuable and unique to our business. I wasn't just following in my parents' footsteps, I was helping to pave new paths forward. After graduating with honors, I officially joined Martinez Family Restaurants as marketing director. This wasn't nepotism, it was recognition of results I'd already delivered. My parents made it clear that, family or not, I'd need to earn my place just like any other employee. If anything, they were harder on me than they were on other staff members, holding me to higher standards and expecting me to work longer hours. My first major project was rebranding our entire chain while maintaining the authentic family feel that made us special. I spent months researching design firms, interviewing potential partners, and developing a comprehensive brand strategy that would work across all our locations. The new logo and website I developed helped us attract corporate catering clients and food delivery partnerships that significantly expanded our revenue streams. But the real test came when we decided to expand outside Arizona for the first time. Opening our first New Mexico location in Las Cruces was a huge risk, requiring significant capital investment and careful market research. I led the marketing launch, coordinating everything from local media outreach to grand opening events. The restaurant was profitable within its first quarter, validating both our expansion strategy and my role in the company's growth. What made our working relationship special was the balance we'd found between family dynamics and professional respect. At home, I was still their daughter, and they still worried about whether I was eating enough or getting enough sleep. But in the office, I was a valued executive whose opinions shaped major decisions. We'd learned to compartmentalize, to have heated debates about business strategy during the day, and then enjoy relaxed family dinners in the evening. The Sunday tradition continued, even after I moved into my own apartment in Roosevelt Row. Every week, we'd gather at the original Abuela's kitchen, usually staying long after closing time to discuss everything from new menu items to potential acquisition opportunities. These conversations had evolved from my childhood sessions of learning basic business principles to sophisticated discussions about market expansion, competitive analysis, and long-term strategic planning. My parents had always been incredibly transparent about the business finances, treating me as a partner rather than just an employee. I knew our profit margins, understood our debt structure, and was familiar with our relationships with suppliers and landlords. This transparency wasn't just about trust, it was about preparation. They wanted me to understand every aspect of the business because they saw me as their eventual successor. The restaurant industry is notoriously difficult, with thin margins and constant challenges ranging from food safety regulations to labor shortages. But we'd built something resilient because we'd built it together, with shared values and mutual respect. Our employees stayed because they felt valued. Our customers returned because they knew they'd get consistent quality and genuine hospitality. Our suppliers worked with us because we paid our bills on time and treated them as partners rather than just vendors. By my 28th birthday, Martinez Family Restaurants had 15 locations across Arizona and New Mexico, employing over 200 people and generating annual revenues of approximately $25 million. I'd been promoted to senior marketing director and was actively involved in all major strategic decisions. The little girl who'd fallen asleep at corner tables had become an integral part of a successful family business. But success in the restaurant industry is never guaranteed, and external pressures were starting to build that would test everything we'd worked to create. The economy was showing signs of strain, with rising food costs and increasing competition from both national chains and trendy new local establishments. Labor shortages were forcing us to increase wages, which put pressure on our profit margins. Two major competitors had opened locations within 5 miles of our flagship restaurant, directly targeting our core customer base. During our Sunday family meetings, the conversations were becoming more serious, more focused on challenges than opportunities. My parents, now in their late 50s, were starting to feel the weight of managing such a complex operation. They'd been working 14-hour days for over 20 years, and the stress was beginning to show in ways that worried me. "Maybe it's time to consider bringing in some outside expertise," my father said one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports that showed our first decline in same-store sales in over 5 years. "Someone with experience in operational efficiency and market expansion." My mother nodded thoughtfully. "We've done amazing things together, but maybe we need fresh perspectives on how to navigate these new challenges." I felt a slight unease at this suggestion, though I couldn't quite articulate why. We'd always been a family business in the truest sense, making decisions together and maintaining control over our own destiny. The idea of bringing in an outside consultant felt like a departure from everything that had made us successful. "What kind of expertise are you thinking about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone supportive while hiding my concerns. "Someone who's helped other restaurant chains optimize their operations and expand strategically," my father replied. "Someone who understands the industry but can see opportunities we might be missing." Looking back, this was the moment when everything started to change. Not because my parents were wrong to seek help, but because they were about to trust someone who saw our family business very differently than we did. Someone who viewed our commitment to employees and community as inefficiencies to be eliminated, our family-centered decision-making as an obstacle to profitable growth. The foundation we'd built together over more than 2 decades was solid, but it was about to be tested in ways we never could have imagined. The bonds of trust and mutual respect that had sustained us through countless challenges were about to face their greatest trial. And I was about to discover that sometimes the people you love most can be led to make decisions that threaten everything you've built together. But I was also about to learn something else. Something that would prove to be the key to saving not just our business but our family relationships as well. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sometimes the protection you need most comes from places you never expected, and sometimes the power to save everything you care about has been in your hands all along, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. What my parents and I had created together wasn't just a collection of restaurants. It was a culinary empire that had redefined Mexican-American dining across the Southwest. Martinez family restaurants had become synonymous with authentic flavors, exceptional service, and community involvement that went far beyond typical corporate social responsibility. We weren't just serving food. We were preserving culture, supporting families, and creating gathering places where 3 generations could share meals and memories. The flagship Abuela's Kitchen had evolved into something of a Phoenix institution. Food critics from major publications regularly featured us in articles about the best authentic Mexican cuisine in the region. Travel bloggers included us on must-visit lists for tourists exploring Arizona. Local politicians held campaign events in our private dining room, knowing that being associated with Martinez family restaurants sent a message about supporting local business and community values. Our menu had grown to include over 60 items, each one carefully crafted to honor traditional recipes while appealing to contemporary tastes. The mole that had made my grandmother famous was still prepared using her original recipe, a complex blend of 23 ingredients that took 3 days to properly develop. But we'd also added fusion dishes that reflected Arizona's diverse population, Korean-Mexican bowls that attracted younger customers, vegan options that appealed to health-conscious diners, and gluten-free alternatives that made our restaurants accessible to everyone. The success of our loyalty program had exceeded every projection I'd made when I first proposed it. We now had over 50,000 active members who received personalized offers based on their dining preferences and visit frequency. The data we collected helped us optimize everything from inventory management to staffing schedules. When we noticed that Tuesday evenings were consistently slow across all locations, we launched Taco Tuesday promotions that increased midweek revenue by 40%. When customer feedback indicated interest in cooking classes, we started monthly events that not only generated additional revenue, but also strengthened our connection to the community. Our catering division had become a significant profit center, handling everything from small office meetings to large corporate events and weddings. We'd catered the Phoenix mayor's inauguration, the grand opening of the city's new convention center, and countless quinceañeras, graduations, and anniversary celebrations. Each event was an opportunity to showcase our food to potential new customers, while building relationships with event planners and corporate clients who provided steady, high-margin business. The employee scholarship program I'd helped establish had sent 17 young people to college over the past 5 years. Maria's son had become a nurse. Tony had graduated from culinary school and was now our head chef at the Scottsdale location. Carmen, who'd started as a server while in high school, had earned her business degree and was now our assistant manager at the Tempe restaurant. These weren't just feel-good stories. They were proof that our investment in people created loyalty and capability that benefited everyone involved. Our supply chain relationships were built on partnerships rather than just vendor contracts. We worked directly with local farms to source produce, supporting sustainable agriculture while ensuring the freshness that made our food exceptional. Our relationship with Ramirez Farms, a family operation in Yuma, had grown from a handshake agreement to purchase their peppers to a comprehensive partnership that included exclusive varieties grown specifically for our restaurants. When drought threatened their operation 2 years ago, we provided an advance payment that helped them install efficient irrigation systems, ensuring both their survival and our continued access to premium ingredients. The technology infrastructure I'd implemented had transformed how we operated. Our point-of-sale systems provided real-time data on sales, inventory, and customer preferences across all locations. Mobile ordering and delivery partnerships had expanded our reach beyond traditional dine-in customers. Social media management had become a sophisticated operation that engaged thousands of followers daily and drove measurable increases in foot traffic. But perhaps most importantly, we'd created a company culture that attracted exceptional people and inspired them to do their best work. Our turnover rate was less than 15% in an industry where 50% was considered normal. Our managers weren't just employees. They were partners who shared in our success through profit-sharing programs and advancement opportunities. 3 of our location managers had started as servers or kitchen staff, proving that hard work and dedication were rewarded with real career growth. The financial performance of Martinez family restaurants reflected the strength of what we'd built together. Our average location generated nearly $2 million in annual revenue, with profit margins that consistently exceeded industry standards. We carried minimal debt, having learned from my parents' early struggles that financial independence was crucial to long-term success. Our cash reserves were sufficient to weather temporary downturns and fund expansion opportunities without relying on external financing. The real estate portfolio we'd assembled was equally impressive. We owned the buildings that housed 8 of our 15 locations, providing both stability and additional investment returns. The original Abuela's Kitchen building had appreciated significantly as downtown Phoenix experienced revitalization, but we'd never considered selling because of its symbolic importance to our family and our brand identity. Our expansion into New Mexico had validated our ability to succeed in new markets while maintaining our core values and operational excellence. The Las Cruces location had been so successful that we'd opened a second New Mexico restaurant in Albuquerque within 18 months. Both locations had been embraced by their communities, earning recognition from local media and developing loyal customer bases that rivals the devotion we'd cultivated in Arizona. The awards and recognition we'd received weren't just industry accolades, they were validation of our commitment to excellence and community service. The Phoenix Business Journal had named us Best Local Restaurant Chain for 3 consecutive years. Arizona Highway Magazine had featured us in their Taste of Arizona special issue. The Arizona Restaurant Association had honored my parents with their Lifetime Achievement Award for their contributions to the industry and their communities. What made me most proud was how we'd maintained our family identity, even as we'd grown into a substantial business operation. Customers still felt like they were dining at a family restaurant, even though we now employed over 200 people across multiple locations. The authentic hospitality that had made our first location special was now part of our training programs, ensuring that every employee understood the importance of making every guest feel welcomed and valued. The community impact of our success extended far beyond the jobs we'd created and the taxes we'd paid. We sponsored Little League teams, provided meeting spaces for local organizations, and donated food for charity events throughout the year. During the economic downturn that followed the 2008 financial crisis, we'd continued hiring when other businesses were laying off employees because we understood that our success was intertwined with the health of our communities. My role in building this empire had evolved from that of an eager teenager learning the business to a strategic leader whose decisions affected hundreds of employees and thousands of customers. The marketing strategies I'd developed had contributed millions of dollars in additional revenue. The operational improvements I'd suggested had increased efficiency and reduced costs. The customer service standards I'd helped establish had earned us customer loyalty that translated into consistent profitability. But success in the restaurant industry is never permanent, and by late 2023, we were facing challenges that threatened everything we'd worked to build. The economic pressures that had been building for months were starting to affect our bottom line in ways that couldn't be ignored. Rising food costs, labor shortages, and increased competition were creating a perfect storm that tested our resilience. The inflation that was affecting the entire economy hit restaurants particularly hard. The cost of beef had increased by 30% over 18 months. Chicken prices had risen by 25%. Even basic ingredients like onions and tomatoes were significantly more expensive than they'd been just a year earlier. We were facing a choice between passing these costs on to customers and accepting reduced profit margins, neither of which was appealing. Labor shortages were forcing us to increase wages and benefits to attract and retain good employees. This was the right thing to do, but it put additional pressure on our profitability. We were competing not just with other restaurants, but with retail stores, delivery services, and other industries that were also struggling to find workers. The employees we did hire often lacked the experience and work ethic that had been standard in previous years. The competitive landscape was becoming increasingly difficult. 2 major national chains had opened locations within 5 miles of our flagship restaurant, backed by marketing budgets that dwarfed our advertising spending. A trendy new, fast casual concept was attracting younger customers with Instagram-worthy presentations and convenience-focused service models. Food delivery services were taking a growing share of the market, charging commissions that made it difficult for independent restaurants to compete profitably. Consumer behavior was changing in ways that challenged our traditional business model. Younger customers were more price-sensitive and less loyal to specific brands. They were more likely to try new restaurants and less likely to become regular customers. Social media had accelerated the pace of change, with new food trends and restaurant concepts gaining popularity and then fading within months. These external pressures were taking a toll on my parents in ways that worried me deeply. My father, who had always been energetic and optimistic, was showing signs of stress that affected his sleep and his appetite. My mother, who had thrived on the creative challenges of menu development and customer service, was becoming overwhelmed by the complexity of managing multiple locations while dealing with supply chain disruptions and staffing challenges. Our Sunday family meetings had become more focused on problems than opportunities. Instead of discussing expansion plans and new menu items, we were analyzing declining sales reports and debating which cost-cutting measures might be necessary. The joy that had always characterized our work together was being replaced by anxiety about the future. It was during one of these increasingly tense family meetings that my father first mentioned the possibility of bringing in outside expertise. Marcus Chen's name had come up through a referral from another restaurant owner who claimed that Marcus had saved his business from bankruptcy through operational improvements and strategic restructuring. The way my parents discussed this possibility made it clear that They were more concerned about our situation than they'd been letting on. They'd always been protective of our family business, resistant to outside interference or advice. The fact that they were willing to consider bringing in a consultant indicated that they felt our challenges were beyond their ability to solve alone. Marcus Chen's background seemed impressive on paper. He'd worked with several restaurant chains, helping them improve efficiency and expand their market reach. He had an MBA from a prestigious business school and experience with companies much larger than ours. His references spoke highly of his analytical skills and his ability to identify growth opportunities that others missed. What none of us knew at the time was that Marcus's previous successes had come at a cost that would have been unacceptable to our family. The restaurant chains he'd saved had been transformed into corporate entities that prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. Employee benefits had been cut, community involvement had been eliminated, and the authentic character that had made these restaurants special had been sacrificed for operational efficiency. The initial meeting with Marcus took place at our corporate office in Scottsdale, a modern building that reflected our success while maintaining the warm, welcoming atmosphere that characterized our restaurants. Marcus arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than most of our employees earned in a month. His presentation was polished and professional, filled with impressive charts and graphs that demonstrated his analytical capabilities. He spoke confidently about market trends, competitive analysis, and operational optimization. He used business terminology that sounded sophisticated and convincing, especially to my parents who had built their success through intuition and hard work, rather than formal business education. What struck me most about Marcus during that first meeting was how quickly he seemed to understand our operation and identify areas for improvement. He'd spent less than 2 hours reviewing our financial statements, but he spoke as if he'd been studying our business for months. His recommendations were specific and actionable, focusing on cost reduction and revenue enhancement strategies that promised significant returns on investment. My parents were clearly impressed by Marcus's expertise and confidence. They asked thoughtful questions about his previous experience and his proposed approach to helping us navigate our current challenges. His answers were articulate and persuasive, backed by case studies and industry data that supported his recommendations. But something about Marcus made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't quite identify what it was. Maybe it was the way he dismissed some of our community involvement activities as unnecessary expenses, or his suggestion that our employee profit-sharing program was overly generous for the industry. His focus seemed to be entirely on financial metrics, with little understanding of the values and relationships that had made our business successful. When Marcus left that first meeting, my parents were energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. They talked enthusiastically about his ideas and his confidence that our challenges could be overcome with the right strategic approach. They were particularly impressed by his promise that he could increase our profitability by 20% within the first year through operational improvements and market expansion. I tried to share their enthusiasm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's vision for our business was fundamentally different from the family-centered approach that had made us successful. His recommendations seemed to focus on short-term profits rather than long-term sustainability, on operational efficiency rather than employee satisfaction, on market expansion rather than community service. Over the following weeks, Marcus began spending more time at our corporate office and visiting our restaurant locations. He was conducting what he called a comprehensive operational analysis that would provide the foundation for his strategic recommendations. He interviewed managers, observed service procedures, and analyzed financial data with the thoroughness of someone preparing for a major business transformation. The changes in our family dynamic were subtle at first, but became more pronounced as Marcus's influence grew. Our Sunday family meetings began to include discussions of his recommendations and suggestions. My parents started using business terminology that sounded like it came directly from his presentations. They began questioning practices and policies that had been successful for years, wondering if Marcus was right that we needed to modernize our approach. Most concerning was how Marcus began to position himself as the voice of expertise and experience, subtly undermining the credibility of our family-based decision-making process. When I raised concerns about some of his recommendations, He would respond with industry data and case studies that made my objections seem naive or uninformed. He had a way of making my parents feel like they needed his guidance to navigate challenges that were beyond their experience. The transformation was gradual, but unmistakable. My parents, who had always valued my input and included me in strategic decisions, began to defer to Marcus's judgment on issues that affected the future of our business. They started making decisions based on his recommendations without the thorough family discussions that had always been our practice. They began to see our traditional approaches as obstacles to progress, rather than foundations for success. Marcus's influence extended beyond business strategy to the way my parents viewed their own capabilities and judgment. He convinced them that the challenges we were facing required expertise they didn't possess, that the restaurant industry had become too complex for family-based management, that professional guidance was essential for survival in the modern marketplace. What none of us realized at the time was that Marcus's ultimate goal wasn't just to improve our operations or increase our profitability. He was systematically laying the groundwork for a fundamental transformation of our business that would eliminate the family control that had been the source of our strength and success. He was preparing to propose changes that would require my parents to surrender the decision-making authority they'd earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test everything we'd built together, challenge the bonds of trust that had sustained our family through countless obstacles, and force us to confront the question of whether our values and traditions were compatible with survival in an increasingly competitive and complex business environment. But Marcus had made one critical miscalculation in his analysis of our business structure. He'd focused so intently on operational details and financial metrics that he'd overlooked a legal reality that would ultimately determine who had the power to make the decisions he was preparing to demand. The family business he thought he understood was more complex than he'd realized, and the control he assumed my parents possessed was not entirely theirs to give away. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my Roosevelt Row apartment, reviewing social media analytics over coffee, when my mother's voice cracked through the speaker with news that made my blood run cold. Our largest supplier, Southwestern Foods Distribution, had just terminated our contract with 30 days' notice. They were consolidating their client base and focusing on larger restaurant chains. We had 1 month to find alternative suppliers for 70% of our ingredients, or we'd be forced to close multiple locations. This wasn't just a business setback. It was a catastrophic crisis that threatened the foundation of everything we'd built. Southwestern Foods had been our primary supplier for over 8 years. They understood our quality standards, our delivery schedules, and our seasonal menu variations. They provided competitive pricing because of our long-term relationship and consistent payment history. Most importantly, they were the sole supplier for several specialty ingredients that were essential to our signature dishes. The timing couldn't have been worse. We were already struggling with increased costs and decreased margins. Our cash flow was tight due to recent equipment purchases and the slower-than-expected performance of our newest location. The last thing we needed was a supply chain disruption that would force us to find new vendors, potentially at higher prices, while maintaining the quality standards that our customers expected. Marcus Chen's response to this crisis was swift and decisive. Within hours of learning about the supplier termination, he had scheduled an emergency meeting at our corporate office. When we gathered that afternoon, he arrived with a thick folder of documents and a presentation that he claimed would solve our immediate problems while positioning us for long-term success. His analysis of our situation was brutally honest. The supplier termination was just the latest symptom of deeper structural problems that had been building for months. Our cost structure was unsustainable in the current market environment. Our operational model was too complex and inefficient. Our family-centered decision-making process was too slow and emotional for the fast-paced restaurant industry. We needed dramatic changes immediately, or we would be forced into bankruptcy within 6 months. The solution Marcus proposed was radical and comprehensive. He had identified a potential buyer for our restaurant chain, a national corporation that specialized in acquiring and revitalizing struggling restaurant brands. They were prepared to offer $35 million for Martinez family restaurants, including all locations, recipes, and intellectual property. The offer represented a substantial premium over our current market value, especially considering our recent performance challenges. But the proposal went far beyond a simple sale. Marcus had negotiated a management agreement that would allow my parents to remain involved in the business, while transferring operational control to professional management. They would receive generous consulting fees and maintain honorary positions as brand ambassadors. The corporate buyer would handle all operational challenges, including supplier relationships, cost management, and expansion planning. The corporate buyer had extensive experience in restaurant acquisitions and operations. They had successfully turned around dozens of struggling restaurant chains through operational improvements and strategic repositioning. Their management team included former executives from major national restaurant brands who understood the complexities of multi-unit operations. They had the resources and expertise to solve our immediate problems while funding aggressive expansion into new markets. My parents' reaction to this proposal was a mixture of relief and excitement. The financial offer was more than they had ever dreamed of receiving for the business they'd built from nothing. The management agreement would allow them to remain connected to the restaurants while eliminating the stress and responsibility that had been weighing on them so heavily. They would be financially secure for the rest of their lives, while still being able to visit their beloved restaurants and interact with longtime customers. Marcus presented the proposal as a win-win situation that would preserve the essence of Martinez family restaurants while providing the professional management and financial resources necessary for long-term success. He emphasized that the corporate buyer had chosen our chain specifically because of our reputation for quality and community involvement. They wanted to maintain our brand identity while expanding our reach and improving our operational efficiency. The urgency of our supplier crisis added weight to Marcus's arguments. We had less than 30 days to find alternative suppliers or face potential closures. The corporate buyer could resolve our supply chain issues immediately through their existing vendor relationships. They could provide the cash flow necessary to weather the transition period. They could implement operational improvements that would restore our profitability and competitiveness. But as I listened to Marcus's presentation, I felt a growing sense of unease that went beyond my usual skepticism about his recommendations. The corporate buyer's track record of successful turnarounds seemed to involve fundamental changes to the acquired restaurant's identities and operations. Their previous acquisitions had been transformed into standardized corporate-managed chains that bore little resemblance to the family businesses they had once been. The management agreement that Marcus described as preserving my parents' involvement seemed designed to marginalize their actual influence over business decisions. They would be consultants and ambassadors, but they would have no real authority over menu development, hiring decisions, or operational policies. The restaurants would maintain the Martinez family name, but they would be controlled by corporate executives who had never worked in our kitchens or served our customers. Most troubling was the timeline that Marcus was proposing. He wanted my parents to sign a letter of intent within 2 weeks, with final closing documents to be completed within 60 days. This accelerated schedule would allow the corporate buyer to resolve our supplier crisis and implement immediate operational changes, but it would also prevent us from fully evaluating the long-term implications of the transaction. When I raised these concerns during the meeting, Marcus responded with a combination of sympathy and condescension that made my stomach turn. He acknowledged that the decision was emotionally difficult, but he emphasized that business decisions couldn't be based on sentiment. The restaurant industry was changing rapidly, and family-owned businesses that failed to adapt would be left behind. Our choice was between accepting a generous offer that would preserve our family's financial security or risking everything on our ability to solve complex operational problems without professional help. My parents were clearly torn between their emotional attachment to the business and their recognition of the practical challenges we faced. They had poured their lives into building Martinez family restaurants, and the thought of losing control was painful. But they were also exhausted by years of increasing stress and responsibility. The financial security that the sale would provide was undeniably attractive, especially as they approached retirement age. The supplier crisis continued to escalate over the following days. Our attempts to find alternative vendors were complicated by the specialized nature of some of our ingredients and the short timeline we were working with. Several potential suppliers couldn't meet our volume requirements. Others couldn't guarantee the quality standards we needed. The few vendors who could accommodate our needs were demanding significantly higher prices that would further erode our already thin margins. Marcus used each setback in our supplier search to reinforce his arguments about the corporate sale. The buyers he had identified could resolve our supply chain issues with a single phone call. They had relationships with national distributors who could provide better pricing and more reliable service than the regional suppliers we'd been using. They had the purchasing power to negotiate favorable terms that would improve our cost structure immediately. The pressure was building from multiple directions. Our restaurant managers were asking questions about ingredient availability that we couldn't answer. Our kitchen staff were concerned about potential menu changes if we couldn't maintain our current supplier relationships. Our customers were beginning to notice inconsistencies in food quality as we experimented with alternative ingredients from different vendors. The financial implications of the crisis were becoming clear through daily cash flow reports that showed the mounting costs of our supply chain disruption. We were paying premium prices for emergency ingredient purchases while dealing with reduced sales due to quality inconsistencies. Our bank was asking questions about our ability to meet loan payment obligations if our financial performance continued to deteriorate. Marcus's daily presence at our corporate office had become a constant reminder of the urgency of our situation. He was working tirelessly to coordinate with the corporate buyers, arrange due diligence meetings, and prepare the legal documents necessary for the transaction. His dedication to solving our problems was evident, but his solutions all pointed in the same direction: surrendering control of our family business to professional management. The breaking point came during a heated family meeting, where the stress of our situation finally overwhelmed the respectful communication that had always characterized our relationships. My father, who had always been patient and thoughtful, exploded in frustration when I continued to raise objections to the corporate sale. "Sarah, you're being selfish and unrealistic," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "We've given you every opportunity to contribute to solutions, but all you do is criticize and complain. Marcus has worked day and night to find a way to save our business, and you're acting like he's the enemy." My mother, who had always been the peacemaker in our family, supported my father's position with a firmness that shocked me. "We've protected you from the worst of our financial problems, but the situation is more serious than you realize. We're facing the possibility of losing everything we've worked for, and you're more concerned about maintaining control than saving our family's future." The accusation that I was being selfish cut deeper than any criticism I'd ever received from my parents. I dedicated my entire career to building our business, working longer hours and accepting lower compensation than I could have earned elsewhere. I'd sacrificed personal relationships and social opportunities to focus on our family's success. The suggestion that I was now standing in the way of a solution felt like a betrayal of everything we'd accomplished together. Marcus's role in this family confrontation was subtle, but significant. He didn't directly attack my position or question my motives, but he had clearly influenced my parents' perception of the situation. His constant emphasis on the urgency of our problems and the limited nature of our options had created a sense of panic that made my parents view my caution as obstruction rather than prudent analysis. The meeting ended with my parents announcing that they had decided to proceed with the corporate sale regardless of my objections. They had scheduled a signing ceremony for the following week, where they would execute the letter of intent and begin the formal process of transferring ownership. They expected me to support their decision and cooperate with the transition, but they were prepared to move forward with or without my blessing. The week between that devastating family meeting and the scheduled signing ceremony was the longest of my life. I felt completely powerless to influence a decision that would fundamentally alter everything I'd worked to build. My parents were treating me like a child who didn't understand the complexities of adult business decisions. Marcus was treating me like an obstacle to be managed, rather than a partner to be consulted. I spent sleepless nights reviewing our financial statements, searching for alternative solutions that might address our immediate problems, without requiring us to surrender control of our business. I researched the corporate buyer's track record with previous acquisitions, finding disturbing patterns of cost-cutting and standardization that eliminated the unique characteristics that made acquired restaurants special. I contacted industry experts and potential alternative investors, hoping to find options that my parents hadn't considered. But my efforts seemed futile in the face of the momentum that Marcus had created. The corporate buyers were pressing for quick action, claiming that their offer was time-sensitive and might be withdrawn if we delayed. The supplier crisis was worsening daily, forcing us to make increasingly expensive emergency purchases to maintain operations. The stress was affecting my parents' health and our family relationships in ways that might never fully heal. The signing ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon at our corporate office. Marcus had arranged for representatives from the corporate buyer to attend, along with lawyers and financial advisors who would facilitate the transaction. The local business press had been invited to cover the event, which Marcus described as a positive story about a successful local business finding the resources necessary for continued growth and expansion. I arrived at the office that Friday feeling numb and defeated. The conference room had been set up with formal seating arrangements and professional presentation materials. The corporate representatives were polished and professional, speaking confidently about their plans for our restaurants and their commitment to preserving our brand identity. The lawyers had prepared stacks of documents that would legally transfer decades of our family's work to corporate ownership. My parents looked older than I'd ever seen them, but they also seemed relieved to be reaching a resolution to problems that had been consuming their lives for months. They spoke graciously about the partnership they were entering and their confidence in the corporate buyer's ability to take Martinez family restaurants to the next level. They thanked Marcus for his expertise and dedication in identifying this solution to our challenges. The moment when my parents were supposed to sign the letter of intent should have been the end of our family's control over the business we'd built together. Marcus had orchestrated every detail of the transaction, from the initial introduction to the corporate buyers to the final signing ceremony. He had successfully convinced my parents that surrendering control was the only way to save our restaurants and secure our family's financial future. But as the corporate representative slid the signature pages across the conference table, something unexpected happened. The lead lawyer, a woman named Patricia Williams who had been reviewing the transaction documents, suddenly looked up with a puzzled expression. "I need to clarify something before we proceed," she said, her voice cutting through the ceremonial atmosphere. "The ownership structure of Martinez family restaurants is more complex than I initially understood. According to the corporate records, the majority shareholder is not David and Linda Martinez." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at Patricia. Marcus's confident smile faltered slightly, and he leaned forward in his chair. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty I'd heard from him. Patricia shuffled through a stack of legal documents before responding. "The majority ownership of Martinez family restaurants is held by Sarah Martinez through an irrevocable trust established in 2012. She owns 51% of the company. Any sale or transfer of ownership requires her signature as the majority shareholder." The words hit the room like a physical blow. My parents stared at Patricia in shock, then turned to look at me with expressions of confusion and disbelief. Marcus's face had gone completely white, and he was frantically flipping through his own copies of the corporate documents. "That's impossible," he said, his voice shaking. "I've reviewed all the ownership records. David and Linda Martinez are the sole owners of the company." Patricia shook her head firmly. "The trust document is quite clear and legally binding. Sarah Martinez has been the majority shareholder for over 10 years. The operational control arrangements may have obscured this fact, but the legal ownership is unambiguous." As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a mixture of shock and understanding wash over me. Suddenly, memories of conversations with my parents from years ago began to make sense. References to paperwork for tax purposes and legal structures for your future that I'd never fully understood. Documents I'd signed when I turned 18 that had been explained as routine corporate formalities. My parents had protected me in ways I'd never realized, creating a legal structure that would ensure my control over the business we'd built together, even if they weren't around to guide it. They had seen further into the future than I'd ever imagined, anticipating challenges and threats that might someday require the ultimate protection: legal ownership that couldn't be taken away. The corporate representative was asking urgent questions about the validity of the trust and the possibility of proceeding with a modified transaction. Marcus was demanding to see the original trust documents, his composure completely shattered. But Patricia was calmly explaining that without the majority shareholders' consent, there could be no sale of Martinez family restaurants. The room erupted in chaos as the implications of this revelation sank in. The corporate buyers were angry about what they saw as a waste of their time and resources. Marcus was desperately trying to salvage the transaction he'd worked so hard to arrange. My parents were staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been pride. And I was sitting there, holding the power to save everything we'd built together, finally understanding that the protection I'd needed most had been in my hands all along. The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like an eternity before Marcus finally found his voice. His carefully constructed composure had completely crumbled, replaced by a desperation that was painful to witness. He began rifling through his briefcase with shaking hands, pulling out document after document, as if he could somehow produce evidence that would contradict Patricia Williams' bombshell revelation. "There has to be some mistake," Marcus insisted, his voice rising with each word. "I've been working on this transaction for months. I've reviewed every corporate filing, every ownership document. David and Linda Martinez are listed as the principals of Martinez Family Restaurants in every record I've seen." Patricia remained calm and professional as she spread the trust documents across the conference table. The papers were yellowed with age, bearing official seals and notarizations that testified to their authenticity and legal validity. She pointed to specific clauses and provisions as she explained the structure that my parents had established over a decade ago. "The trust was created when Sarah turned 18, Patricia explained methodically. David and Linda Martinez transferred 51% ownership of Martinez Family Restaurants to an irrevocable trust with Sarah as the sole beneficiary. The trust document specifies that Sarah gains full control of her shares when she reaches the age of 25, which occurred 4 years ago. The operational control arrangements that have been in place are separate from the legal ownership structure." My father's face had gone pale as memories apparently came flooding back. He rubbed his temples and closed his eyes, and I could see him mentally retracing decisions made so many years ago that they'd become buried under layers of daily business operations and family routines. "The tax attorney," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Henderson and Associates. They recommended the trust structure to minimize estate tax implications and provide asset protection. We thought it was just routine planning." My mother nodded slowly, her own understanding dawning. "Sarah was starting college. The lawyer said it would protect the business if anything happened to us, and it would provide tax advantages as the business grew. We never imagined it would matter for something like this." The corporate representatives were having an urgent whispered conversation at their end of the table, clearly trying to determine whether there was any way to salvage their planned acquisition. Their lead negotiator, a stern-faced man named Robert Chen who bore no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, finally addressed the room with barely concealed frustration. "This is highly irregular," Robert declared. "We've invested significant time and resources in this transaction based on representations about the ownership structure. If the actual majority shareholder is someone else entirely, we need to understand what that means for our agreement." Marcus was sweating visibly now, his expensive suit showing dark stains under his arms as he struggled to maintain control of a situation that had spiraled completely beyond his influence. He turned to me with an expression that mixed pleading with barely concealed anger. "Sarah, you have to understand the bigger picture here," he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Your parents brought me in because this business is failing. The supplier crisis is just the beginning. Without professional management and adequate capitalization, Martinez Family Restaurants will be bankrupt within 6 months. This sale is the only way to preserve anything of value." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. The weight of the moment was overwhelming, but I also felt a clarity that had been missing throughout the months of confusion and family conflict. For the first time since Marcus had entered our lives, I held the ultimate authority to determine the future of our family business. "I need to understand something first," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Marcus, how long have you known about the trust structure?" His response was immediate and defensive. I had no idea. If I had known, obviously, I would have approached this situation differently. The ownership records I reviewed showed David and Linda as the sole proprietors. But Patricia was shaking her head, consulting her own documents. "That's not accurate. The trust filing was recorded with the Secretary of State and would appear in any comprehensive ownership search. The annual corporate reports for the past 10 years have listed the trust as the majority shareholder. Anyone conducting proper due diligence would have discovered this information." Marcus's face flushed red as the implication of Patricia's statement became clear. Either he had been incompetent in his research, or he had known about the trust and deliberately concealed it from everyone involved. Given his otherwise meticulous preparation and professional presentation, incompetence seemed unlikely. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess," suggested the corporate attorney, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. This revelation requires us to reconsider our entire approach. But I wasn't ready to let Marcus off the hook. The months of manipulation, the damage to my relationship with my parents, and the stress that had nearly destroyed our family demanded answers. I stood up from my chair and walked around the table until I was facing Marcus directly. "I want to see your due diligence files," I said firmly. "All of them. Every document you reviewed, every search you conducted, every piece of research that informed your recommendations." Marcus's eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route. "That information is proprietary and confidential. I can't just—" "Actually, you can," Patricia interrupted. "As the majority shareholder, Sarah has the right to review any documents related to proposed transactions involving her company. If you refuse to provide them, she can obtain them through legal discovery." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus was trapped, and everyone in the room knew it. After what felt like an eternity, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder marked MFR Due Diligence, Confidential. As I flipped through the pages, the scope of Marcus's deception became clear. The very first document in the file was a corporate ownership report that clearly identified the Sarah Martinez Trust as holding 51% of Martinez family restaurants. The report was dated 6 weeks before Marcus's first meeting with my parents, proving that he had known about the trust structure from the very beginning. But the revelations didn't stop there. Marcus's research files contained detailed financial projections showing that our current challenges were temporary and manageable, with proper cost control and strategic adjustments. His own analysis indicated that Martinez Family Restaurants was fundamentally sound and well-positioned for recovery without external intervention. Most damning of all was a series of email exchanges between Marcus and the corporate buyers that revealed the true nature of their arrangement. Marcus wasn't just a consultant hired to help our family. He was a business broker working on commission to identify acquisition targets for corporate consolidation. His fee for delivering Martinez Family Restaurants would have been over $2 million, paid by the buyers upon successful completion of the transaction. The emails also revealed Marcus's strategy for overcoming potential resistance from family members. He had specifically identified me as the primary obstacle to the sale, and had developed a plan to isolate me from the decision-making process by convincing my parents that I was inexperienced and emotional. His goal was to complete the transaction before anyone discovered the true ownership structure or had time to conduct independent analysis of our financial situation. As I read through the damning evidence, the room remained silent except for the sound of pages turning and my parents' increasingly labored breathing. When I finally looked up, my father's face was a mask of rage and betrayal that I'd never seen before. "You lied to us," my father said, his voice barely controlled. "You knew Sarah owned the majority of our business, and you deliberately concealed it. You manipulated us into believing we were facing bankruptcy when your own analysis showed we were financially stable. You destroyed our family relationships for a commission check." Marcus's response was a pathetic attempt at damage control. The commission was never the primary motivation. I genuinely believed that corporate ownership would benefit everyone involved. The trust structure was a complication that would have made the negotiations more difficult, but the fundamental benefits of the transaction remained valid. But my mother wasn't buying his explanation. "You told us Sarah was being selfish and unrealistic. You convinced us that she was standing in the way of saving our business. You turned us against our own daughter for money." The corporate representatives were gathering their materials and preparing to leave, clearly wanting no part of the ethical disaster that Marcus's scheme had become. Robert Chen addressed my parents with professional courtesy but obvious disappointment. "We were led to believe that this was a straightforward acquisition of a family business, seeking professional management. The circumstances we've discovered today are not consistent with our company's standards for business conduct. We'll be terminating our relationship with Mr. Chen immediately and withdrawing our offer." As the corporate team filed out of the conference room, Marcus made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his plan. He turned to me with an expression that tried to convey sincerity but only managed to project desperation. "Sarah, even if the transaction is off the table, your family still needs help navigating the challenges you're facing. I have expertise and connections that could be valuable in resolving your supplier issues and improving your operational efficiency. We could work together on a different basis." The audacity of his suggestion was breathtaking. After being exposed as a manipulative liar who had nearly destroyed our family for personal profit, he was still trying to position himself as indispensable to our success. I looked at this man who had caused so much pain and felt nothing but contempt. "Get out," I said simply. "Take your files, take your lies, and get out of our office. If I see you anywhere near our restaurants or our family again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Marcus tried to protest, but my father was already moving toward him with an expression that suggested physical violence was a real possibility. "You heard my daughter. Leave, now." After Marcus had gathered his belongings and fled the office, my parents and I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything that had just transpired. The conference room looked like a battlefield, with scattered documents and empty chairs bearing witness to the confrontation that had just unfolded. "I'm so sorry," my mother said finally, tears streaming down her face. "We should have trusted you. We should have listened to your concerns instead of dismissing them. We let that man turn us against you, and it nearly cost us everything." My father nodded, his own eyes wet with unshed tears. "You tried to warn us, and we accused you of being selfish. You were protecting our family's interests while we were preparing to give them away to strangers. I don't know how we can ever make this right." The pain in their voices was almost unbearable, but I also felt a profound sense of relief that the truth had finally emerged. The months of confusion and conflict had been resolved, but the deeper question remained. How could we move forward as a family and as a business after everything that had happened? "We need to focus on solving our actual problems," I said, pulling out my laptop and connecting it to the conference room projector. Marcus was right about one thing. We do have challenges that need immediate attention, but we can address them ourselves, as a family, without surrendering control to outsiders. Over the next several hours, we conducted the kind of thorough strategic planning session that should have happened months earlier. I presented the supplier alternatives I'd been researching, including a regional distributor in California that could meet our quality standards at competitive prices. We analyzed our cost structure and identified operational improvements that could restore our profit margins without sacrificing employee benefits or community involvement. Most importantly, we developed a new decision-making framework that would prevent us from being manipulated by outside advisors in the future. We agreed that any major business decisions would require unanimous family consent and independent verification of all financial projections and market analysis. We would seek professional advice when necessary, but we would never again delegate our judgment to consultants who didn't share our values. The immediate crisis that had precipitated Marcus's involvement was resolved within 2 weeks. The new supplier relationship I'd negotiated not only solved our ingredient sourcing problems, but actually reduced our food costs by 8% compared to our previous arrangement. The operational improvements we implemented increased efficiency without affecting the quality or service standards that our customers valued. But more importantly, our family had emerged from the crisis stronger and more united than before. The experience had tested our relationships and our values, and we had ultimately chosen each other over the false security of external rescue. We had learned that our greatest strength wasn't our financial resources or our business expertise. It was our trust in each other and our commitment to shared principles. 3 months after the confrontation with Marcus, Martinez Family Restaurants was thriving again. Our sales had recovered to pre-crisis levels, our operational efficiency had improved significantly, and our employee satisfaction scores were higher than they'd been in years. We had opened preliminary discussions about expanding into Colorado, but this time, we were proceeding carefully and deliberately, with full family involvement in every decision. The trust structure that had saved our business became the foundation for a new approach to family business governance. My parents and I worked with Patricia Williams to establish clear protocols for ownership transitions and decision-making authority that would protect our interests while ensuring continued family control. We created advisory board positions for trusted longtime employees and community leaders who could provide guidance without having decision-making power. Most gratifyingly, our story had become an inspiration to other family businesses facing similar challenges. Patricia had written an article for a legal journal about the importance of proper estate planning and ownership structure in protecting family enterprises. The article had generated dozens of inquiries from families who wanted to ensure that their businesses would be protected from the kind of manipulation we had experienced. The personal relationships that had been damaged during the Marcus crisis took longer to heal, but they eventually grew stronger than before. My parents and I had learned to communicate more openly about business challenges and family concerns. We had established new traditions and rituals that reinforced our bonds while respecting our individual autonomy and professional expertise. 6 months after the crisis, I was working late at the original Abuela's kitchen when my parents surprised me with an unexpected visit. They had brought a bottle of champagne and 3 glasses, along with a folder of legal documents that I initially viewed with suspicion. "Relax," my father said, laughing at my expression. "These are good documents." Patricia helped us establish a family foundation that will formalize our community involvement and charitable giving. We want you to serve as the founding president. The foundation documents outlined an ambitious program of scholarships, community development grants, and small business support initiatives that would be funded by a percentage of our restaurant profits. It was exactly the kind of program I had always envisioned for our family, a way to use our success to create opportunities for others while strengthening our connection to the communities we served. As we toasted the foundation and our family's future, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The crisis that had nearly destroyed us had ultimately revealed strengths we didn't know we possessed, and values that were more important than any financial consideration. We had learned that true security came not from external validation or professional rescue, but from trust in each other and commitment to principles that couldn't be compromised. The Martinez family restaurant story had become more than just a business success. It was a testament to the power of family bonds and authentic values in overcoming even the most sophisticated attempts at manipulation and control. We had faced our greatest challenge and emerged not just victorious but stronger and more united than ever before. And, somewhere out there, Marcus Chen was presumably looking for his next target, another family business that he could manipulate for personal profit. But he would never again underestimate the power of proper legal planning, family loyalty, and the determination of people who refuse to surrender what they've built together. Our signature dishes still featured my grandmother's original recipes, but they now carried an additional ingredient that made them even more special: the knowledge that they were served by a family that had been tested by fire and had chosen to stand together. That ingredient, more than any spice or seasoning, was what made Martinez family restaurants truly unforgettable. 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I found myself standing in the kitchen of our newest location in Denver, watching our head chef Carlos train a group of culinary students from the local community college. The partnership program we'd established with the school was just one of many initiatives that had grown out of our family's renewed commitment to community development and authentic business practices. The Denver expansion had been everything that our aborted corporate sale was not: carefully planned, family-controlled, and designed to strengthen rather than compromise our core values. Instead of rushing into new markets with external capital and professional management, we had taken 18 months to research the Colorado market, build relationships with local suppliers, and recruit staff who understood our culture and standards. The process had been challenging but incredibly rewarding. We'd learned that our approach to restaurant operations, which Marcus had dismissed as inefficient and outdated, was actually a significant competitive advantage in markets where customers were seeking authentic experiences and genuine community connections. The Denver location had exceeded its first-year revenue projections by 30%, with customer satisfaction scores that surpassed even our most successful Arizona restaurants. But the real victory wasn't measured in financial metrics or operational benchmarks. It was visible in the confident way our employees interacted with customers, the pride they took in their work, and the sense of ownership they felt in our collective success. We had proven that family business values could not only survive in a competitive marketplace, but could actually drive superior performance when properly implemented and consistently maintained. The leadership team that had emerged from our crisis was stronger and more capable than anything we had achieved before Marcus's destructive intervention. My parents had embraced their roles as senior advisors and brand ambassadors, sharing their decades of experience while trusting me to handle day-to-day operations and strategic planning. The partnership we had developed was built on mutual respect, open communication, and shared commitment to principles that transcended individual ambitions. My role as majority shareholder had evolved from a legal technicality I barely understood to a source of responsibility and authority that guided every major decision. I had learned to wield that power judiciously, always consulting with my parents and key employees before implementing significant changes, but never hesitating to make difficult decisions when our values or long-term interests were at stake. The governance structures we had established with Patricia Williams' guidance had become a model that other family businesses were studying and adapting for their own organizations. We had created advisory boards, succession planning protocols, and conflict resolution mechanisms that protected our family relationships while ensuring professional management standards. The Martinez Family Business Institute, which we had launched in partnership with Arizona State University's Business School, was already working with dozens of family enterprises throughout the Southwest. The community impact of our renewed focus and financial stability had exceeded our most optimistic projections. The Martinez Family Foundation had awarded over $200,000 in scholarships and small business grants during its first year of operation. Our restaurant locations had become gathering places for civic organizations, cultural events, and community celebrations that strengthened the social fabric of their neighborhoods. The supplier relationships we had rebuilt after the crisis that Marcus had manipulated had grown into genuine partnerships that benefited everyone involved. Our commitment to local sourcing and sustainable practices had helped several small farms and specialty producers expand their operations and reach new markets. The regional food network we had helped establish was now serving dozens of restaurants throughout Arizona and New Mexico. Employee retention and satisfaction had reached levels that made us a case study for human resources professionals and business schools. Our profit-sharing program, which Marcus had criticized as excessive, had enabled dozens of employees to purchase homes, start small businesses, and send their children to college. The internal promotion rate meant that every management position in our organization was filled by someone who had started in an entry-level role and worked their way up through demonstrated competence and commitment. The financial performance of Martinez Family Restaurants had not only recovered from the challenges that had made us vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation, but had reached unprecedented levels of profitability and stability. Our debt-to-equity ratio was the lowest in our company's history. Our cash reserves were sufficient to fund expansion opportunities without external financing. Our revenue per location exceeded industry averages by significant margins. But perhaps most importantly, we had developed the analytical capabilities and strategic planning processes that would protect us from future manipulation attempts. The due diligence protocols we had established required independent verification of all financial projections and market analyses. The advisory relationships we maintained with trusted professionals provided expertise without compromising our decision-making authority. The personal growth I had experienced during and after the crisis had transformed me from a capable marketing director into a confident business leader who could navigate complex challenges while maintaining authentic relationships with employees, customers, and community partners. The skills I had developed in crisis management, strategic planning, and family business governance had applications far beyond our restaurant operations. Speaking engagements at business conferences and family business symposiums had become a regular part of my schedule, sharing lessons learned from our experience with other entrepreneurs and family business leaders. The story of how proper legal planning and family loyalty had overcome sophisticated manipulation attempts resonated with audiences who faced similar challenges in their own organizations. The recognition we had received from industry associations and community organizations validated our approach and provided platforms for advocating for family business values and ethical business practices. The James Beard Foundation had nominated us for their Outstanding Restaurant Award, citing our commitment to community service and authentic cuisine. The Phoenix Chamber of Commerce had honored us with their Family Business of the Year Award. Media coverage of our story had generated interest from television producers and book publishers, who wanted to document our experience for broader audiences. While we had been selective about these opportunities, focusing on platforms that would accurately represent our values and lessons learned, The visibility had helped us connect with other families facing similar challenges, and with customers who appreciated our commitment to authentic business practices. The relationships with former employees who had left during the uncertainty of the Marcus crisis had been gradually rebuilt as word spread about our recovery and renewed stability. Several talented individuals had returned to our organization, bringing new skills and perspectives they had gained during their time away. Their decision to rejoin our team validated our culture and provided additional expertise for our continued growth. The legal precedents established through our experience had influenced family business planning strategies throughout the region. Patricia Williams had published additional articles about the importance of ownership structure, transparency, and the ethical obligations of business advisors working with family enterprises. Law firms were incorporating lessons from our case into their estate planning and business succession practices. The mentorship relationships I had developed with other young family business leaders had evolved into an informal network that provided mutual support and shared learning opportunities. We met quarterly to discuss challenges, share best practices, and provide advice on everything from succession planning to digital marketing strategies. The friendships that had emerged from these professional connections had enriched my personal life, while strengthening our collective ability to preserve and grow family enterprises. The romantic relationship that had developed with David Chen, a third-generation restaurateur whose family operated a successful chain of Asian fusion restaurants in California, had grown out of our shared experiences and values, rather than convenience or proximity. Our courtship had been built on mutual respect for each other's professional accomplishments and commitment to family business principles. The possibility of eventual marriage and the potential for combining our restaurant operations had added new dimensions to my long-term planning considerations. The vacation home we had purchased in Sedona had become a retreat where our extended family could gather for strategic planning sessions, celebrations, and simple relaxation away from the demands of daily operations. The property had also served as a venue for leadership retreats and team-building activities that strengthened our organizational culture while providing opportunities for professional development in a beautiful and inspiring setting. The cookbook project that my mother and I had undertaken to document our family recipes and restaurant techniques had evolved into a comprehensive celebration of Mexican-American cuisine and family business traditions. The advance orders had exceeded publisher expectations, and the planned book tour would provide additional opportunities to share our story while promoting our restaurants and foundation activities. The technology innovations we had implemented to streamline operations and enhance customer experiences had attracted attention from restaurant industry technology companies seeking partnership opportunities. Our customer loyalty program had become a model for other restaurant chains, and the data analytics capabilities we had developed provided insights that informed everything from menu development to location selection for future expansion. The cooking competition television show that had invited me to serve as a guest judge had provided a platform for discussing the importance of authentic ingredients and traditional cooking techniques in an era of industrial food production and corporate restaurant chains. The exposure had attracted new customers to our restaurants while reinforcing our brand identity as guardians of culinary traditions and family values. 2 years after the crisis that had nearly cost us everything, I stood once again in the conference room, where Marcus's deception had been exposed, but this time the atmosphere was celebratory rather than confrontational. We were hosting a reception for the business leaders, community partners, and family members who had supported our recovery and growth. The walls were lined with photographs documenting our journey, groundbreaking ceremonies for new locations, scholarship award presentations, employee recognition events, and family celebrations that marked our continued success. My parents moved through the crowd with the confidence and grace of people who had weathered significant challenges and emerged stronger for the experience. They spoke with pride about our accomplishments while giving credit to the employees, customers, and community partners who had made our success possible. Their commitment to our shared values had never wavered, even during the darkest moments of our crisis. The evening's program included presentations about our expansion plans, foundation activities, and industry leadership initiatives that would extend our impact beyond restaurant operations. The audience included representatives from other family businesses who were implementing governance structures and planning processes based on our experience. Their success validated our decision to share our story and our methods, rather than guarding them as competitive secrets. As I addressed the gathering that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point and the lessons that would guide our future decisions. The attempted manipulation that had nearly destroyed our family relationships and business operations had ultimately revealed strengths we didn't know we possessed and clarified values that would guide us through any future challenges. The trust structure that had protected our ownership during the crisis had become the foundation for comprehensive succession planning that would ensure family control through multiple generations while providing mechanisms for professional management and external investment when appropriate. The legal frameworks we had established would prevent future manipulation attempts while preserving the flexibility necessary for continued growth and adaptation. The community of family business leaders, professional advisors, and industry experts that had supported our recovery had grown into a network of relationships that provided ongoing guidance and opportunities for collaboration. The shared commitment to ethical business practices and authentic values created connections that transcended competitive considerations and geographical boundaries. Standing before that audience of friends, family, employees, and partners, I felt profound gratitude for the protection that had been provided by people who loved me enough to plan for challenges they hoped would never materialize. The trust my parents had established when I was 18 had been their way of ensuring that our family's work would continue, even if they weren't able to guide it personally. Their foresight had saved not just our business but our relationships and our values. The young woman who had been dismissed as inexperienced and emotional had proven capable of leading a complex organization through crisis and recovery, while maintaining the principles that made it special. The family that had been nearly torn apart by manipulation and fear had emerged more united and committed than ever before. The business that had been targeted for corporate acquisition had demonstrated that authentic values and family control could compete successfully against any challenge. As the evening concluded and guests began to depart, my parents and I remained in the conference room that had witnessed both our greatest crisis and our ultimate triumph. The silence was comfortable now, filled with shared understanding and mutual respect, rather than the tension and confusion that had characterized our interactions during Marcus's reign of manipulation. "I'm proud of how you handled everything," my father said simply. "Not just the business decisions, but the way you've grown as a leader and as a person. Your mother and I always believed in your potential, but you've exceeded even our highest expectations." My mother nodded, her eyes bright with tears of pride and relief. "The trust we established was meant to protect you and the business. But we never imagined you'd need to use it the way you did. You saved our family in ways we never could have anticipated." Looking around the room where so much had transpired, I felt the weight of responsibility and opportunity that came with being the guardian of something larger than myself. The business we had built together would continue to grow and evolve, but it would always remain true to the values and relationships that had sustained us through our greatest challenges. The future held unlimited possibilities for expansion, innovation, and impact, but it would always be grounded in the understanding that authentic success comes from serving others rather than enriching ourselves. The protection I had received had taught me the importance of protecting others, and the love that had sustained me through crisis had shown me the power of building something worth defending. Martinez family restaurants would continue to serve exceptional food in welcoming environments, but more importantly, it would continue to demonstrate that family businesses guided by authentic values could thrive in any marketplace and overcome any challenge. The legacy we were building would endure not because it was protected by legal documents, but because it was sustained by relationships and principles that could not be corrupted or destroyed. 5 years have passed since that fateful day in the conference room when Patricia Williams revealed the truth that saved our family business, and the transformation that has occurred since then exceeds anything I could have imagined during those dark months when Marcus Chen was systematically destroying our relationships and attempting to steal our life's work. What started as a desperate fight to save Martinez family restaurants has evolved into something far more significant, a movement that has changed how family businesses across the nation approach succession planning, governance, and protection from predatory advisors. The call came on a crisp October morning as I was reviewing architectural plans for our upcoming expansion into Texas. The voice on the other end belonged to Senator Maria Rodriguez, chairwoman of the Senate Small Business Committee, and her words sent a surge of excitement through me that rivaled anything I'd felt during our most successful restaurant openings. "Sarah, I'm calling to inform you that the committee has voted unanimously to invite you to testify before Congress about the Family Business Protection Act," she said, her voice carrying the weight of historical significance. "Your family's experience has become the cornerstone case study for legislation that could protect thousands of family enterprises from the kind of manipulation you encountered." The Family Business Protection Act had emerged from a coalition of family business owners, legal experts, and advocacy organizations who had been horrified by stories like ours. The proposed legislation would require business consultants and advisors to disclose all financial interests and potential conflicts when working with family enterprises. It would establish criminal penalties for deliberately concealing ownership structures or misrepresenting business conditions to facilitate unwanted acquisitions. Most importantly, it would create a registry of verified family business advisors who had demonstrated ethical conduct and specialized expertise. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary. What began as our private family crisis had gradually evolved into a public advocacy effort, as more and more families came forward with similar stories of manipulation and betrayal. The network of family business leaders that had formed around our experience had grown to include hundreds of enterprises representing billions of dollars in revenue and hundreds of thousands of employees. The Martinez Family Business Protection Foundation had become the central coordinating organization for this movement, providing legal resources, educational programs, and advocacy support for families facing threats to their enterprises. The Foundation's Legal Defense Fund had already helped 12 families successfully defend against hostile takeover attempts facilitated by corrupt advisors. Our educational seminars had reached over 5,000 family business leaders, providing them with the knowledge and tools necessary to protect their interests. The impact of our advocacy work had extended far beyond individual cases. Business schools across the country had revised their curricula to include courses on family business ethics and governance. Professional associations for business consultants and advisors had implemented new codes of conduct and certification requirements. Law firms specializing in family business planning had developed new standard practices for ownership structure disclosure and conflict of interest identification. The restaurant industry had undergone its own transformation, partly influenced by our example and the principles we had championed. The National Restaurant Association had established new guidelines for ethical business consulting and had created a certification program for advisors working with independent restaurant operators. Trade publications regularly featured articles about family restaurant businesses that had successfully resisted corporate acquisition attempts while maintaining their authentic character and community connections. Martinez Family Restaurants itself had become a case study taught in business schools and featured in management textbooks as an example of how family enterprises could not only survive but thrive in competitive markets while maintaining their core values. Harvard Business School had developed a comprehensive case study of our crisis and recovery that was being used in courses on family business management, crisis leadership, and ethical decision-making. The financial performance of our restaurant chain had continued to exceed all projections. We now operated 23 locations across 5 states, with annual revenues approaching $60 million. Our expansion had been methodical and strategic, always prioritizing cultural fit and community impact over pure financial returns. Each new location underwent an 18-month development process that included extensive community engagement, local hiring initiatives, and partnerships with regional suppliers. The Texas expansion that I was planning represented our most ambitious growth initiative to date. Rather than simply opening restaurants in major cities, we were pioneering a new model that combined traditional restaurant operations with culinary education centers and small business incubators. The Dallas location would house our flagship restaurant alongside a teaching kitchen, where local entrepreneurs could learn restaurant management skills and test new food concepts. The partnership we had formed with the University of Texas Business School would provide academic support for our entrepreneurship programs while offering students real-world experience in family business operations. The research being conducted through this partnership was generating insights about family business sustainability and community economic development that were influencing policy discussions at state and federal levels. The technology innovations we had developed to support our operations had attracted attention from major restaurant industry technology companies seeking licensing agreements for our proprietary systems. Our customer relationship management platform, which integrated loyalty programs with community engagement tracking, had proven so effective that we were now marketing it to other independent restaurant operators. The revenue from these technology licensing agreements was funding additional foundation activities and research initiatives. The publishing venture that had grown out of our cookbook project had evolved into a multimedia platform that celebrated family business stories and authentic cultural traditions. The Martinez family publishing imprint had released 12 books featuring family enterprises from various industries and cultural backgrounds. The accompanying documentary series, which aired on a major streaming platform, had reached millions of viewers and had sparked national conversations about the importance of family businesses in American economic and cultural life. The mentorship program I had established for young family business leaders had grown to include over 200 participants from across the country. The annual conference we hosted in Phoenix had become the premier gathering for next-generation family business leaders, featuring workshops on succession planning, governance structures, and leadership development. The relationships formed through these programs had created a nationwide network of mutual support and collaboration that was strengthening the entire family business sector. The romantic relationship with David Chen had evolved into a partnership that exemplified the potential for family businesses to support and strengthen each other. Our engagement had been announced at the previous year's Family Business Conference, and our upcoming wedding would bring together two restaurant dynasties in a celebration of shared values and complementary strengths. The merger discussions between our restaurant chains had progressed carefully, with both families committed to preserving the unique identities and cultures that made each enterprise special. The legal precedents established through our battle with Marcus Chen had influenced court decisions and regulatory policies across multiple jurisdictions. Patricia Williams had become a recognized expert in family business law, frequently testifying in cases involving advisor misconduct and ownership structure disputes. The legal framework she had helped us develop had been adopted by hundreds of other family enterprises, seeking to protect themselves from similar threats. The investigative journalism that had exposed Marcus Chen's pattern of predatory behavior had revealed a network of corrupt advisors and acquisition specialists who had been systematically targeting family businesses across multiple industries. The Federal Trade Commission had launched a comprehensive investigation into these practices, resulting in criminal charges against 17 individuals and the recovery of over $300 million in fraudulent proceeds. Marcus himself had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and violation of fiduciary duty. The whistleblower protections that had been established as part of the Family Business Protection Act had encouraged dozens of former employees of predatory consulting firms to come forward with evidence of systematic manipulation and fraud. The resulting investigations had uncovered a sophisticated network of corporate raiders who had been using seemingly legitimate business consulting as a cover for hostile acquisition activities. The media attention surrounding our story and the broader family business protection movement had generated significant public support for the proposed legislation. Major newspapers had published editorial endorsements of the Family Business Protection Act, citing the economic and cultural importance of family enterprises and the need for stronger protections against predatory practices. Television news programs had featured investigative reports on consultant fraud, using our case as a primary example of the risks facing family businesses. The testimony I was preparing for the Senate hearing would draw on 5 years of experience building protections for family businesses while growing our own enterprise. The statistics were compelling. Family businesses employing protected governance structures had survival rates 30% higher than those without such protections. Communities with strong family business sectors showed greater economic resilience and social cohesion. The economic impact of family business failures due to advisor fraud was estimated at over $15 billion annually. But beyond the statistics and policy arguments, my testimony would focus on the human cost of predatory advisory practices. The families that had been torn apart by manipulation and deception. The employees who had lost their jobs when family businesses were acquired and downsized. The communities that had been weakened by the loss of locally owned enterprises that provided more than just employment, but served as anchors for civic and cultural life. The week before my scheduled congressional testimony, I found myself once again in the conference room where our family's crisis had reached its climax. This time, however, the room was filled with representatives from family businesses across the country who had gathered to coordinate their advocacy efforts and share their experiences. The diversity of the group was remarkable. Restaurant owners from California, manufacturing families from Michigan, retail dynasties from New York, and agricultural enterprises from Iowa. Each family had their own story of challenges overcome and lessons learned, but common themes emerged that reinforced the importance of the legislation we were supporting. The need for transparency in advisor relationships, the importance of proper ownership structure documentation, the value of independent verification for major business decisions, the power of family unity in overcoming external threats. The preparation sessions for my congressional testimony had been intensive, involving mock hearings with experienced policy advocates and detailed briefings on the legislative process. The questions I could expect from senators ranged from technical details about advisor regulation to broader questions about the role of family businesses in the American economy. I had prepared comprehensive responses that drew on both our personal experience and the broader research that had emerged from our advocacy work. The night before flying to Washington, I walked through the original Abuela's Kitchen location, where our family's journey had begun so many years ago. The restaurant was busy with the dinner rush, and I moved through the dining room greeting customers and checking on staff. Many of the diners were longtime regulars who had supported us throughout our various challenges and celebrations. Their loyalty and encouragement had been a constant source of strength during even our darkest moments. In the kitchen, I found Carlos training a new line cook on our signature mole preparation. The recipe that had started with my grandmother's traditional approach now included ingredients sourced from farms across 3 states and preparation techniques that had been refined through decades of experience. But the essential character remained unchanged: authentic, complex, and made with care by people who took pride in their work. The conversation with my parents that evening covered the remarkable journey we had shared since that first meeting with Marcus Chen. The crisis that had nearly destroyed our family relationships had ultimately strengthened them in ways we never could have anticipated. The trust that had saved our business had become the foundation for even deeper bonds of mutual respect and shared purpose. When we established that trust structure 20 years ago, we never imagined it would become the key to protecting not just our business, but thousands of others, my father reflected. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are ones we don't fully understand at the time. My mother nodded, adding, "The most important thing we've learned is that success isn't just about building a profitable business. It's about creating something that serves others and stands for principles that matter. That's what makes it worth protecting." The flight to Washington the next morning was filled with final preparations and reflections on the magnitude of the opportunity before me. The legislation I would be supporting could fundamentally change the landscape for family businesses across the country. The protections we were advocating could prevent thousands of families from experiencing the kind of manipulation and betrayal that had nearly cost us everything. The Senate hearing room was packed with family business owners, advocacy organization representatives, legal experts, and media representatives. The atmosphere was formal but charged with the energy of people who believed they were participating in something historically significant. The senators on the committee had clearly done their homework, asking detailed questions about specific provisions of the proposed legislation and their potential impact on various constituencies. My testimony focused on 3 key themes: the economic importance of family businesses to American communities, the sophisticated nature of the threats they face from predatory advisors, and the specific legal protections necessary to preserve family enterprise while maintaining healthy business consulting relationships. I shared our family's story not as victims seeking sympathy, but as survivors who had learned valuable lessons that could benefit others. The questions from committee members were thoughtful and challenging, requiring me to defend specific aspects of the proposed legislation while explaining complex business and legal concepts in accessible terms. Senator Rodriguez asked about the potential impact on legitimate business consulting relationships. Senator Jackson inquired about enforcement mechanisms and federal versus state jurisdiction issues. Senator Williams wanted to understand the economic modeling behind our projected benefits. The most powerful moment of the hearing came when Senator Martinez, whose own grandparents had operated a small grocery store in Texas, asked me to explain how family businesses differed from other enterprises in ways that justified special legal protections. My response drew on years of research and experience, but ultimately came down to a simple truth. Family businesses are built on relationships and values that extend beyond profit maximization, making them both more vulnerable to manipulation and more valuable to their communities when properly protected. The committee vote was unanimous in favor of advancing the Family Business Protection Act to the full Senate. The legislation still faced significant challenges, including opposition from some business consulting organizations and concerns about regulatory burden from free market advocates. But the strong bipartisan support in committee and the compelling evidence we had presented suggested that the bill had genuine prospects for becoming law. The media coverage of the hearing was extensive and overwhelmingly positive. Editorial pages across the country praised the proposed legislation as common-sense protection for an essential sector of the American economy. Television news programs featured interviews with family business owners who had been victimized by predatory advisors, reinforcing the human impact of the problems we were addressing. The return flight to Phoenix was filled with phone calls from family business leaders across the country who had watched the hearing and wanted to express their support. The momentum behind our advocacy effort was building in ways that exceeded our most optimistic projections. The possibility that our family's painful experience could lead to protections for thousands of others was profoundly gratifying. Back home, the celebration at Abuela's kitchen that evening brought together employees, customers, community leaders, and family members who had supported our journey from crisis to advocacy. The private dining room was filled with photographs documenting not just our restaurant's growth, but our family's evolution, from local business owners to national advocates for family enterprise protection. As I addressed the gathering that evening, I reflected on the incredible transformation that had occurred since Marcus Chen's deception had been exposed in that very building. What had started as a desperate fight to save our family business had evolved into a movement that was changing how America thinks about and protects family enterprises. The trust structure that had saved our ownership had become a model for thousands of other families. The governance practices we had developed had been adopted by family business organizations nationwide. But perhaps most importantly, we had demonstrated that authentic values and principled leadership could overcome even the most sophisticated attempts at manipulation and control. The young woman who had been dismissed as inexperienced and emotional had helped build a national movement for family business protection. The parents who had been manipulated into nearly giving away their life's work had become respected voices for ethical business practices. The family that had been nearly destroyed by external pressure had emerged stronger and more united than ever. Standing before that gathering of friends, family, and supporters, I felt profound gratitude for the protection that had been provided by people who loved me enough to plan for challenges they hoped would never materialize. But I also felt a deep sense of responsibility to use the platform we had built to continue protecting others who faced similar threats. The Family Business Protection Act would eventually become law, creating the regulatory framework necessary to prevent the kind of predatory behavior that had nearly destroyed our family. But the real protection for family businesses would always come from the relationships, values, and governance structures that made them worth defending in the first place. Martinez Family Restaurants would continue to grow and evolve, always remaining true to the principles that had sustained us through our greatest challenges. The business we had built together would serve as a lasting testament to the power of family unity, authentic values, and the determination to protect what matters most. The legacy we were building would endure not because it was protected by legal documents, but because it was sustained by relationships and principles that could overcome any challenge. And somewhere out there, other families would benefit from the protections we had fought to establish, ensuring that their own stories would have different and better endings than they might have otherwise. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.